Good day to everyone joining us, and welcome to today's X-Talks webinar. Today's talk is entitled The Quality Culture Playbook, How to Build a Quality Culture. My name is Ryan Muse, and I'll be your X-Talks host for today. Today's webinar will run for approximately 60 minutes, and this presentation includes a Q&A session with our speakers. Now, the webinar is designed to be interactive, and webinars work best when you're involved. So please feel free to submit your questions and comments for our speakers throughout the presentation using the questions chat box, and we'll try to attend to your questions during the Q&A session. This chat box is located in the control panel, which is on the right-hand side of your screen. And if you require any assistance along the way, please contact me at any time by sending a message using this same chat panel. At this time, know that all participants are in listen-only mode, and please note that the event will be recorded and made available for streaming on xtalks.com. At this point, I'd like to thank Qualio, who developed the content for this presentation. Founded in 2012, Qualio is the first cloud quality management software for all life sciences companies. Medical device and pharmaceutical companies need a secure and scalable quality management system with the flexibility to support their evolving needs. Qualio meets that challenge by cutting through the complexity to optimize and automate critical quality processes. The remote-first Qualio team is distributed across North America and Europe. Now, I would like to introduce our speakers for today's event. Meg Sinclair has 10+ years as a quality assurance, regulatory affairs, and compliance professional with a range of cross-functional skills and experience spanning nonprofits to startups. Laura Arujo brings years of leadership experience in the pharma and biotech industry in the areas of quality, regulatory, and information technology, and continues to be instrumental in her role as the Vice President of Quality at 4G Clinical. Kelly Stanton brings over 20 years of experience in both the pharmaceutical and medical device industries to the world of small startups and scalable quality system implementations. Devin Campbell thrives at the intersection of engineering, biology, and design, where leading the development of innovative, commercially successful medical devices, IVDs, and companion diagnostics. And Christy Johnson is a mechanical engineer with deep experience at the crossroads of product development and quality. She started her career working in the aerospace industry before migrating into medical devices. Now, without further ado, though, I'd like to hand the mic over to our very first speaker today, Meg Sinclair. You may begin when you're ready.
Great, thank you, Ryan. Welcome everyone to our webinar today. Excited to bring you this topic on quality culture. It's near and dear to my heart, and I'm sure our panelists as well. Let's go ahead and take a look at our agenda for today. First, we're going to define what a quality culture is, and then talk about what a healthy quality culture looks like, and then the 3 elements of a quality culture, which include communicating quality, data-driven decision making, and then quality culture is the continuous improvement culture. So let's go ahead and talk about what a quality culture is. Wanted to start with this quote here. I think it's really great to talk about what a quality culture is. And if you ask any number of quality managers, you're likely to get different answers as to what a quality culture is. In fact, I asked our own team today here at Qualio with a vast knowledge of quality culture, what they thought and how they would define a quality culture. And I got several different answers, the most pervasive being it's everyone's responsibility, that quality is pervasive, and then it really drives continuous improvement. So I'll open it up to our panelists to add anything there, and then we can go ahead and get started talking about what a healthy quality culture looks like. Panelists, anything to add to that definition?
Yeah, I think you've achieved a true culture of quality when they stop talking about the quality team and quality becomes more characteristic of your organization.
I think that's a really great theme. One of the things my teammate brought up was that it's everyone's responsibility, that it's not just a quality team or quality police, that it's really everybody's responsibility, regardless of their role, their title, that they are responsible. Everybody owns that responsibility of quality. So let's go ahead and talk about what a healthy quality culture looks like. Devin, do you want to kick it off and tell us a little bit about what a healthy quality culture looks like to you?
Well, I think it's one where there's a lot of ownership. We've kind of touched on that to start off right from the bat. It's one where we don't have a lot of finger pointing, where we're saying, well, that's not my responsibility, that's somebody else's responsibility to do it. You know, a healthy quality culture, the team is there to work with each other and to drive innovation, drive quality, drive best-in-class thinking, drive risk-based thinking throughout the entire product development and commercialization processes. Rather than saying, well, you know, that's not my job, somebody else is going to do that. Somebody else has to think about risk. So I think a very healthy quality culture is, you know, we're all stepping up to that plate and kind of thinking through those aspects, you know, the bare core fundamentals that quality is built upon.
Great. I think that's some great insight. Christy, anything you want to share on what a healthy quality culture looks like for you?
I think just to add on to what Devin was saying, I think if you can implement a culture of quality early, people can start to think of it as a way to take credit for really for the good work they're doing. An example would be thoroughly documenting testing early on. What revision of a bill of materials goes into testing, that kind of a thing. A lot of times people just want to fly through, but really to integrate a culture of quality early means let's just take a brief moment to take credit for the great work and innovation that we're doing, to write it down in a way that we all agree.
Laura, anything you want to add on as to a healthy quality culture?
Yeah, so it's interesting in this heavily regulated environment that I work in, you know, a healthy quality culture is one where quality isn't seen as the police officers or the people that are, you know, auditing and checking boxes and making sure you adhere to regulations, right? It's where quality becomes the teachers and the helpers. And if you think about a healthy quality culture, it's really three things: teamwork, trust, and communication. You know, and the quality organization, as in like people that report to me, help facilitate those, not police against them. So
yeah,
that's how we see
I
it.
think that's yeah, I think that's an important thing, that quality is a helper and not a authority figure. It's really to collaborate and work together with the team. I think another important thing to talk about here too is the quality management system that supports that culture should be usable and be something that's not only to meet requirements, but also that the business can use, is readable for everyone, and that they can drive, is it going to drive this continuous improvement? So are those procedures, all those policies, are they going to help drive that improvement that the organization's looking to grow? So I think that's an important foundation.
It has to be helpful, or, you know, it won't work. Right?
You touched on a nice point there, Meg. Like, quality for the sake of, for regulatory sake, is the wrong reason to be engaged in quality, right?
Yeah.
If you're doing it just because you think regulators say you need to do things in a certain way, that's the wrong mentality. A healthy quality culture is not doing it just because you have to do it to satisfy particular regulations. You do it because it's the right thing for the business and the right thing for patients. I wanted to add one other idea to look at a healthy quality culture. And this comes from, you know, my personal practice. I work with a lot of emerging entrepreneurs and early stage companies. And I think for them, a very healthy quality culture is one that is growing and evolving, and it's humble. So it starts out small. It doesn't have to be everything that you need, you know, that you think you need at the end to satisfy regulators. It's kind of what you need, and you stop. You know, it's continuous improvement. You stop and you look at yourself and say, okay, well, what aspects of quality should we now adopt and bring in, and how is our quality culture thriving? Are we ready to take on more pieces of it? So I think another aspect of a really healthy quality culture is one that looks at itself and grows. It's not just a stagnant type system.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Yeah. Kelly, anything to add there on healthy quality cultures?
No, I think I think everybody's pretty well hit the mark, but I'll just add, you know, having it be easy, accessible, making sure people understand how their roles contribute to that, why it's important. You're not just writing this down because the quality police expect you to. all of those things contribute to a healthy quality culture. And to Christy's point, the earlier you can embed this in your organization, the better off you are, because to try to institute it later when people are very set in their ways can be a real uphill battle. And it's important for everybody to understand, we're all trying to do the right thing for the patient, and this is part of how we do that.
Great. That's some wonderful insights about what a healthy quality culture looks like. Let's talk a little bit now about why it's important to have that healthy quality culture. It's really going to help set the organizational mindset. Are you going to be proactive or reactive? Again, it's that uphill battle of, are you going to start with quality, or are you going to have to bring that in later when people, as Kelly said, are set in their ways? And then there's also that business impact. Quality culture is going to help drive customer satisfaction, employee satisfaction, and ultimately that bottom line. It's going to help improve efficiencies. So it will really help that bottom line in the end. And then it will help with benchmarking. When you have a quality framework and that quality culture, you can resource, execute, and evaluate your progress along the way. Aside from just meeting the requirements, what else do you think is the real benefit of having a quality culture, panelists?
I'll jump in.
Sure.
When you are trying to attract partners, whether it's, if you're a small company, you're trying to attract VC money or angel money or potential strategic partners, or if you're a bigger company, you're trying to attract partners to work with you. Having a quality culture, one of my roles in a prior life with a major pharmaceutical company was to go in and help do the due diligence work to look at companies. And one of the things that I would come back with when we're looking at companies to either partner with or to buy was, do they really truly have that kind of quality culture built in? And when you talk with the teams and it reads clearly through that, they all really understand the role of quality and that they all have a responsibility to it, and it seems really clear and kind of pervasive to the organization. That shows really well when we go back in and say, do we want to be associated with this team in some way? And to be able to say, yeah, they've got a strong quality culture in there. It gives you the sense of confidence that they can deliver on what they say they're going to deliver, and that they can do it the right way, and we can trust their data.
Devin, that extends to attracting employees too, right?
Oh, absolutely, sure.
Being a growing company, right? It's really important for us to, attract and retain, the best, and really having a quality culture where every employee is empowered to make decisions and there's clear communication and job responsibilities is really key for that.
Yeah, and I just want to piggyback onto that, Laura. I think it's really important to encourage feedback across employees. And when you're an employee who feels empowered to give feedback and feel like you own those quality pieces, I think that just adds to the collaboration and just makes for a really great place to work when there is a quality culture in place. So great. Anything else to share on the benefits of having a quality culture?
Just one clarification point, Meg, is that this has to come from the top. That might seem obvious to a lot of people, but it's not always clear, and it's really easy to sort of let the business side of things get in the way, right? We have shareholders, we have stakeholders, whoever that we have to make happy, and making the sale sometimes puts a lot of pressure on people. But having those open conversations and really keeping a focus on quality, on our patients, on what the end goal is, makes a huge difference.
It's no mistake those ISO standards highlight top management's responsibilities, right? So as ownership of quality. So great points there, Laura. Thank you. Great. All right, so let's go ahead and talk now about the elements behind that communication and maintaining a quality culture. So the first one being communicating quality. Got to set expectations for everyone, right? And know what is needed. Setting those is going to help everyone understand the quality policy and their quality objectives, and communicating quality behaviors are tied to outcomes. So team panelists here, how can we communicate a person's job tasks fit into that larger quality picture? if it's a frontline manufacturing worker, person just applying a label, how do we tie those roles to that larger quality picture within the organization? What tips and tricks do you guys have to share?
I'll start us out, Meg. I think
Thanks.
from the beginning, when maybe you have a new employee that is starting in a role, to explain not just their quality, the quality expectations for that person because of the policy or the procedure that's in place, but also to explain what is the outcome to the patient or to the safety or efficacy of the device if we don't do certain things that we say we're going to do. So I think like explaining the bigger picture can be really a valuable way to communicate that.
Yeah, I had a
Agreed.
teammate this morning share, yeah, they had patients come and talk about the products they received from their manufacturer, and that has had a lasting impact on her and the work that she did. So I think that's a great way to tie people's work back to that end and the outcomes that we're hoping for. But these are products going into real life people. It could be your family members, your friends. So just keeping that at the forefront of their minds as they're doing their work.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to jump in with too. It's so important because it can be pretty, the job can get boring when you're working third shift manufacturing and you're just gluing parts together all day long, or all night long in this case, to make sure that they understand, that the contribution of everyone in the organization and how that all ties together. That's definitely a very critical aspect. And even in the startup space, you've generally got people who are, very enthusiastic about the products that they have invented, but they also need to understand that the FDA isn't just going to take your word for it. You got to write this stuff down, and you have to write it down in a way that makes that data, that keeps the data integrity and all those kinds of things. So it definitely translates all the way, from startups to, the 60,000 employee Novartises of the world. All of these things are important along the way, and it comes all the way down to each individual understanding the impact of their job on the organization.
And then another challenge is keeping leaders engaged when they get removed from the front lines of quality. Laura, do you have any thoughts or suggestions on how to keep leaders engaged in quality?
Yeah, I mean, this is where communication really comes in, right? And it's really important. We do a whole bunch of things as a company, which is really cool. We did implement quality right from the start. We're very lucky because we're a young company, only 6 years old at this point. But we do things like bring everyone together, and we hold what we call science fairs, where everybody rotates through, a small group of people that present on what they're doing, what their latest challenges are, what, technology they're using. And everybody goes through it, senior management to, the office managers, so we do a lot of things like that, a lot of sharing, a lot of communications. We use a lot of tools internally as well. One of my greatest things to watch is we use like an instant messenger tool and internally, and we have channels where you can post stuff. And one of the best things is we have a quality channel where they can ask quality questions. And I love when a question gets asked and no one on my team has to answer it because someone else answers it. That's cool.
That has to be a beautiful thing when that happens. It's lovely. And so speaking of that, kind of that tool, how can we build an environment where employees openly share information? Kind of how do you guys facilitate that in your own organizations?
I'll jump in first.
Sure.
I'll reiterate a theme that we touched on earlier, but I think the leadership team needs to openly share information, right? They need to walk the walk and talk the talk. I know it's cliche, but if they don't, then the example will not be set for the rest of the employees to see that this is a safe place for me to be able to share ideas, and maybe they might be ways that we do things differently than we're doing it right now. Those should be openly encouraged, as opposed to just saying yes to everything and kind of moving along through it. So I definitely think to build that environment where all the employees feel open and safe and free to share information and ideas and suggestions, it has to be demonstrated, not just lip service where we just kind of talking about it, but it needs to be shown by the leadership team in an open environment. I mean, even if, you know, one leader is going one direction and another leader says, well, let's think about this and let's think through the risk management of it, or whatever, in a way that's transparent to the rest of the team, they can see, oh, that's a safe space where I can explore alternatives and think through what's the risk, what's the impact to patients, what's the impact of the business, all the kind of quality aspects of it definitely has to be demonstrated through the senior leadership.
I agree. We sort of follow the, celebrate successes, learn from mistakes, but make the learning a really positive one, right? So that, it's okay to make mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes, right? It's how you address it and how you learn from it. And so I think that's really important, that everybody feels okay to make a mistake. It's going to happen, right? And that really comes down from senior management. I agree, Devin. No blaming, no, pointing the finger, it's how do we deal with it? Let's learn from this. Let's never do it again. Everybody, In
the spirit of continuous improvement, you can't make improvement if you don't make mistakes.
True, that's true.
Yes. Yeah, I wonder if maybe instead of mistakes, we just call them opportunities for improvement. Be a nice way to think of it. All right, that was some great thoughts on communication and quality. Let's talk now about data-driven decision making and how that impacts quality. So quality needs to be driven by the process, and the process must be driven by data. Oftentimes people want to skip a true diagnosis and get to that quick fix. So again, another theme I heard from my team today was doing things right the first time is quality. So Laura, anything you want to share here around data-driven, or any examples you'd like to share?
Yeah, so we're a little bit different in that we don't have sampling, and we don't have inspection results or manufacturing widgets or lots, and so really what we look at is continuous improvement opportunities, particularly through our quality system. And, there's so much opportunity there in terms of audits, in terms of, just looking at your procedures. How often do your procedures change over time? If they're changing a lot, maybe it's time to look at the process as a whole. And so we do a lot more of sort of looking at procedural or just opportunities for doing things differently, as opposed to, numbers and data. We don't have a lot of that. But for sure, it's really about making decisions based on what we can see in front of us, not, what you think you might do or what a regulator thinks you should do, right?
Or a hunch. Yeah, it's nice to follow the data. Christy or Devin, anything to add here on using data to make your decisions to drive quality?
I'll jump in, Christy. I'll jump in. And there's even an audience question right now in the chat that's kind of touches on this. It'd be interesting with the rest of the group to look at it. The colleagues think that quality means a lot of data and double the work, right? How do we change this mentality? And one thing I'll offer up to the group, and then we can maybe chew on it a little bit as a team. The cost of poor quality, right? We haven't really explored that yet in the call, but if we're not taking credit for the good work that we're doing early, which feels like, oh, it's creating a whole bunch more data. It's really, in most cases, quality is being done. I mean, savvy engineers and scientists are doing the right thing. Maybe just not documenting or capturing it in a place where that data is being captured, but it's not like things are being done just on a whim. You often think through, what are the impacts of this change? What are the impacts of this design? How does this affect enzymes in my assay? Good scientists and engineers think through this in the medical device space, but we don't always necessarily take credit for it. The cost of that poor quality, of not taking a moment just to kind of write it down and think through a rationale or document some of the data that we just did in an indelible way that someone can trust later and look at. When you get down the line, you say, oh, wait a second, now it's time for us to do verification validation, or now we're gonna show some data with the FDA in a pre-sub. and you want to pull that data back, if you haven't really documented it, you can't do hand waving and say, oh yeah, we did that 2 years ago. And you pull up some random PowerPoint presentation that you have the data archived on your computer. You know, that's not valid, right? So you want to go back and say, okay, well, I see that you did that, but did you do that test under protocol? Can you repeat that result? How can I trust that it's accurate and that you can do it again? So a lot of times, it's not really that you're creating extra data and double the work. It's at some point you're going to have to write it down. And I would argue that you're doubling the work by waiting to the last minute to do it, because now you have to repeat those tests in a way that you can take credit for, as opposed to, yeah, actually I recorded it really early and I got the data and I dropped it into our quality system and it's there as a quality record. We can go back and reference it if we want to. You did that right from the start. As you're growing, it saves you so much more time and money and effort and headache and heartbreak toward the end of the process when you realize you've done so little of the work that you're supposed to have done. So I think maybe that's kind of one of the ways to explore changing that mentality is look at the cost of poor quality curves. It's almost an exponential rate when you get closer and closer to launch and closer to talking to real regulators.
I have a story that comes out of what you've just described. Early development process, a very simple process as part of a manufacturing activity. An assumption was made about, well, we always do it a certain way. That process got acquired by another company. The engineers on the new company made an assumption. Nobody checked the notes. Turns out when we were in the middle of executing the largest recall the company had ever seen, nobody documented the reason for that assumption clear back in the early design process. And as it turned out, when we were going through our investigation and and troubleshooting and all of these things, trying to understand what was happening, the failure rate associated with a very simple process and a very simple assumption was like 70%. But nobody wrote it down way back when, and it didn't seem important. Those are the kinds of things that you fast forward, whether it's months or years. Largest recall that company has ever experienced to date was every single device we had put in the field that we had to pull for this one very simple assumption. And so I think, to answer that question, but to speak to, quality culture, data-driven trending, it's not double the work. It feels like it right now. When you're sitting in that room trying to decide whether or not you're recalling every single device you've ever made, and you're digging through notes and old notebooks and looking at old data and trying to recalculate some things and figure out, like, is this real? Is this not real? If you don't have it documented in a way that's solid and not in some PowerPoint on somebody's computer, it's not available to you to leverage for the future. It's easy to not think about, the future us decisions, but for those of us who've been in QA for a long time, and the old adage of if you don't write it down, it didn't happen. I'm sure all of us on this call could tell lots of horror stories about industry that you can root cause back to somebody didn't think this was important to document. And I could tell stories all day of how that's bitten me in my career over the years. Somebody else chose not to put it down. Now I'm trying to recreate it and figure out what the heck's going on. And it happens in processes. It happens in manufacturing. It's a common thing.
We see this.
Go ahead, Christy.
With some of our early stage startup teams, they're really early, and everyone thinks that their device can get to market in 6 months or 9 months or a year, and development a lot of times just takes longer than everyone thinks it will. And there's turnover, people retire, people get different jobs, and even just like that turnover can be really damaging if we didn't take the time at the beginning to really take credit for the work that we did.
I was just going to add too, this is like the opportunity, Kelly, when you were speaking about quality to be the teachers, right? I work with a whole bunch of technology disruptors, I'll say, right? We're innovators in technology in the space. And You know, a lot of people think that, you know, quality and innovation can't live together, right? You can't say them both in the same sentence. And so it's really about me showing that absolutely they can, you know, and giving examples and walking them through and showing people, you know, that you know, what we're trying to do is just help in the long run. And here's how, you know, with real examples, with real stories, you know, and show them that it's not hard. And we always talk about the real why, you know, why are you doing this? They go, well, that, you know, that EMA auditor. I'm like, no, that's not why you're doing it. You know, that might be something that happened that they asked about because you didn't do it, but that's not the real why, right? So I think that's important too, is for people to understand the real why. You know, it's not to satisfy a regulator or, you know, even to satisfy me as a VP of quality, right? It's just because it's the right thing to do. It helps you do your job.
Great insights on using data. Thank you all. I think data is also great when you don't know where to go, maybe in an investigation or with a problem or where to take a process. I think data can really lead you in the right direction. So rather than a hunch, following that data. So again, great points, everybody. Thank you. Let's talk now about our last tool in our toolbox. Oh, I guess we already kind of hit on this panelist question. So I think we had a great talk there. So quality culture is a continuous improvement culture. So kind of getting to using all that data and driving that improvement as we grow and scale our businesses. So I think we hit on this at the beginning, but preventive actions, you know, are we taking those opportunities for improvement and running with it when we see them, and then encouraging feedback, and then internal audits are more than just a checkbox. So let's hit on the first option, that preventative actions. How do you guys use preventative actions to get ahead or get credit for doing the good work you're doing? Does anyone? I know when we have internal audits and have opportunities for improvement or any kind of supplier audits we get, I always like to take those findings, those opportunities for improvement, those suggestions, and turn them into preventive actions and take credit for doing good work and proactive work and being proactive with our system. And then encouraging. Go ahead, Christy.
I would argue that a preventive action too is for our early stage startups that are really just getting their legs underneath them. I think it's preventive to put in place an early quality system that's really easy to follow, maybe not even compliant yet with the standard or the regulation. And I would say it's preventive in a way that it doesn't like super saturate the people who are going to try and use those procedures and turn them off from the beginning. I think baby stepping an organization into a little bit of structure can be preventive in that it just gives them a little bit of taste to understand a little bit at a time, and then you can revise things and change a document every week if you want, or every month if you want, as the organization grows and becomes more mature.
Well, I like to what Devin was saying earlier about, you know, the development engineers, the scientists involved, they're doing good work. And so getting credit for doing that good work by documenting it through the preventive action process. You know, the auditors love to see that we're using our quality systems. And so I always hate to pull out, well, you should do this because the auditors like it. But you know, as you're building that culture of quality, it comes back to, let's take credit for the great work we're doing and these ideas that you have, and maybe how we've thought about how this might improve our products or our processes. And maybe we can't do it right now, but if you're at least capturing those ideas, then as things start to sort of build momentum, you can come back to that. And if you haven't, and you know, this goes to the feedback, you know, comment here as well. You know, if you haven't been capturing those things, it's hard to figure out where to start as you're going through and trying to grow it and improve it. And it's really empowering to people to feel like they're being heard, and having an idea, you know, feedback going into, you know, the various management teams. We all look at that and go, yeah, this is a great idea, let's do it. We capture that and take credit for it as a preventive action. That's talk about engagement. That's a great way for people to engage with the systems in place, the quality systems in particular.
I think that continuous feedback loop with customers and within your organization is an important part of driving that continuous improvement with your quality. When you're creating that space for people to feel safe to provide feedback, to improve processes that they're working on, maybe their managers aren't on the front line, but they are, and they have some insight on what could be improved. I think if you have a good quality culture where you can have safe spaces for those people to bring up that feedback and improve those processes, that'd be great. Devin, something to add there?
Yeah, so I'm gonna touch a live wire here for a second, and we'll see how you all respond. The first check mark here, preventive actions. That's like 50% of a 4-letter word that most people hate to hear in medical devices. A lot of times when people say CAPA, people's like shivers go up their spines, and people are like, oh God, I hate CAPA systems. And I'm from the development environment. I'm a development person. I mean, to do good development in medical devices, you have to be really good at quality. But in the development sphere, particularly, you hear CAPA, and you might think, oh God, I work somewhere else. And once you open a CAPA, now everything is just bureaucratic and it takes forever and to do things. So I just want to kind of harp on this for a second, that when we say preventative actions and encouraging feedback and writing things down, we don't necessarily need to do it, especially for earlier companies that aren't as mature yet to have that kind of infrastructure effectively working and in place. What's important is the spirit of it, right? That we are taking some time to capture it. Maybe it's not in a CAPA, and I know we only have 2 of the 4 letters here, but maybe it's not through that kind of structured infrastructure, but to go through and say, well, we should take a good hard look at ourselves on a regular basis and say, how are we doing? What have we done that missed the mark in the last period of time? And how can we do a better job with that going forward? That's really good product development, right? To sit on a regular basis and stop and look back at yourself, not because the quality system tells you to do it, but because you're product development professionals, and you want to stop and encourage feedback and reflect on what you're doing. And that's kind of the true spirit of continuous improvement. Stopping to pause and look back. It doesn't have to be in a CAPA template, but the fact that you go through that exercise and maybe you write it down, at least for an earlier stage company, you write it down and say, hey, we looked back, we saw a few things where we missed the mark. We're going to do a little bit better this time. Here's what we want to try, to do, but almost like in software development using, like agile sprints, right? At the end of each sprint, you stop and you look back and you say, how did we do in that sprint, and what can we do better on the next one on a very regular basis? That's really the true heart of continuous improvement. And I'm responding here in a live wire way, because we've got 2 of the 4 letters there that sometimes bristles people's, the hair on the back of their necks. I'm curious what the rest of the group thinks.
I think CAPAs are a necessary evil in our world, but I don't think, process improvement should be lumped under the CAPA world, right? I think CAPA is a great way to record corrective actions that you've taken and root cause of certain issues. But I'm going to tell a little story about process improvement, if you guys will humor me for 2 minutes. I ran my own consulting firm before I joined 4G, and I was working with a software development group, as a matter of fact, Devin, and they were having trouble getting their documentation done, right? And they were saying, this is ridiculous. There's too much documentation. We can't do it. We just want to be developers. And so I brought the whole team into a conference room, and I had them write down on the walls, around the room, all the documentation that they had to deliver. And then I had them rank them in how easy it was to create those documents. And then I had them rank them on how useful those documents were. And guess what? The documents that were hardest to create and maintain were the ones that were of little value to them. I'm like, why are you guys doing them? And they're like, well, because the regular, I'm like, nobody says what type of documents you have to have. Get rid of it. And they're like, we can do that? I'm like, you can do that, So I think that's the thing, I hate to keep harping on quality as the teachers, but that's what we have to do. We have to lead them through sometimes to show them, because either in their careers or people they've met or regulators, there are bad regulators out there. There are bad inspectors. And that sticks with people, you know, and they become fearful. And we just have to make them realize that's not all there is to this.
Speaking next to audits and auditors, I think another sign of a continuous improvement culture is feeling like internal audits are more than just a checkbox. I feel like a lot of organizations see them as just a requirement to fulfill every year. But if you can really embrace internal audits and reflect on those changes you need to make, you can really go above and beyond and improve your quality culture. I know I have an internal audit coming up myself next week, and I'm quite excited to have some fresh eyes on my system. Is that a similar sentiment for you guys?
Yeah, part of that, Meg, is trust, right? So our internal audits, I think, are really successful because I and my team have shown that we're never going to share those with anybody, right? Internal audits are strictly for process improvement. You know, we don't share them with our clients. We don't, you know, we share results for continuous improvement, but we want them to be feel free to say anything to us, you know, so that we can help them. And so I think that getting to that point is really where you should be, instead of fearing that your auditors are either checking boxes or looking for issues, like, right? Oh, I'm going to catch you not following your process. It's like, that's not the purpose of an audit.
Yeah.
I think that gotcha mentality is something that a lot of quality professionals fall into, where they become, like Laura, you were saying at the beginning, like the police, where, oh, there's an internal audit today. You know, everybody clean up your desk and don't say the wrong thing. And I think that's also top management's job, is to set the expectation that in the setting of an internal audit, there should be conversations and room for employees to not just provide real feedback about improving processes, but also for the quality team to sit down, pull up a process, sit down with an employee and say, okay, here's what's required in the regulation or the standard or whatever the target is, but we have some leeway in here. Help me craft what this actual procedure says. What would work for you? And just inviting your team in to participate in a way that's more of like encouraging them to own part of the process and really weigh in. And then they're more likely to want to follow it too.
Mm-hmm.
I like a piece of that, Christy, that it used to anger me when people would say, I have to do something or I can't do something because the regulations say so, right? And I've been in the industry long enough that I used to carry around a little blue book in my pocket, and I'd say, okay, show me where 820 says that. And
Show me where.
I'd call BS. and you know, people hide behind, and a lot of times people in the quality or regulatory space will hide behind the processes of the company and say, well, we have to do this because regulators say it, and then kind of scare people into doing it. And I'd pull it back out and say, like, no, the regulation doesn't say that. And I like what you're saying there, Christy. If the rest of the organization and the team and the people that are following particular processes, if they understand the process that you're following is something that the company has written, and you know, you've established a process, you need to demonstrate that you're following the process and you have objective evidence to suggest that, to show that you're doing it. But it's not necessarily that the regulations say you have to, you know, do things in a super specific way. I think if people understand that and know it, they might be more prone to help challenge status quo and say, why are we doing this in this SOP? They might be more open to challenging it because they know it's really our interpretation of what the regulation says. Maybe we can do it better and still meet the spirit of the regulation, as opposed to, I can't challenge this because, well, this is just what we have to do to meet the regulation. Of course, there are things that, you know, are black and white like that, but I would say probably 90% of the time it's not. It's really the company's interpretation of, and the SOPs that they've written and the work instructions they've written that really should be challenged, right?
And I think it's a responsibility too of management and anyone working in quality too, running an audit, to get to know, I mean, if you're in charge of quality for an organization, get to know the people who are executing the procedures, learn their backgrounds, what's their training, what's their focus, where are their strengths, and what things are going to definitely be opportunities for improvement, and help craft the language that is written in a way that they'll be able to understand and execute on.
I think we can fall into the trap of, and by we, I mean quality professionals, can fall into that trap of sort of being your own worst enemy, right? And not being approachable, not being collaborative. And that kind of culture can definitely come from, can start from the top, or it can start at an individual contributor level. But, if everybody's trying to do the right thing, and I don't think people are ever trying to do the wrong thing, I think there can be gaps in processes and gaps in understanding, and the all of continuous improvement is about addressing those gaps. I think Laura said it best at the earlier, we're all human, people make mistakes. So if those mistakes are going to result in faulty products or process not followed, and therefore a regulatory risk, how do we make sure that everyone can feel safe to come forward when they see those kinds of things, contribute to overall quality? And there was a comment from an audience member about, organizations develop an audit culture rather than a quality culture. Focuses more on policies and procedures, not a lived culture. That's absolutely the wrong way to go about a quality culture. Audits should be a tool, but it should be a very open, transparent, collaborative conversation where everybody, again, we come back to everybody understands how what they do contributes to that overall cultural approach. And when you get into those, because I've done the same thing, Devin, yeah, okay, I appreciate your feedback. Show me in the regulations where it says we have to do this. And that can be a good fallback. That can also be a bad fallback. But if you can continue the conversation in those moments, there may be amazing new ideas and ways to do it differently that are still compliant. But if we don't encourage feedback, react to that, engage lots of people in the quality culture as a whole, then everybody's just going to sit in their little cube and do their job and not speak up and contribute to those that whole thing, and that takes quality culture down in a hurry.
Yeah. Real fast.
Yeah. And auditors can't just be auditors, right? I mean, they can't just breeze in and audit and breeze out, right? They got to be involved in the organization. And you have audit plans for a reason, because plans can change, right? And if there's an opportunity to do some big learning versus, finishing an audit, I'm gonna do the learning thing, and my audit plan can change. It's a plan. I think that's really important. Auditors have to be part of the whole, not this independent group that comes in like a regulator,
Yeah. And I think if you have a healthy quality culture in place, you'll be ready for whatever audit comes, and you'll have all the things, and people will be living and breathing that quality system and those policies, and then there won't need to be that audit culture. So just to tack on to that. So we've talked a lot about a lot of tools that we're all using for continuous improvement. Are there any that we didn't talk about here, panelists, that you wanted to highlight for our listeners?
I just want to bring up one thing that we sort of touched on, but we haven't said a lot about it, and that's risk, right? If you look at every regulation today, every guidance document that comes out, they all talk about risk and taking risk into account. That being said, even regulators know we have to run businesses, right? And so it's really about risk. Bite off small pieces. What are the riskiest areas you need to focus on first? You don't have to do everything perfectly the first time. You just do it based on risk. Look at your highest areas of risk. What are the things where are you going to get, the biggest bang for your buck? The low-hanging fruit, all those sort of words we use to explain it. I think that's really important for us to identify risk and use risk as a tool to drive our continuous improvement.
All right. So just to review, so we can go ahead and move on to our question and answers here. Quality culture is about seeing, hearing, and feeling that quality all around you. It's everyone's responsibility. It's personalizing those outcomes to quality behaviors to create a high impact for frontline workers and top management. And its quality is going to be driven by processes, and those processes must be driven by data. And then take credit for improving the quality culture and celebrate those victories in public ways, whether that's in management review, in your channels, in your communication channels. Just be really deliberate in celebrating those quality victories. Great. Any final takeaways, panelists, before we move to Q&As?
I think we'll probably touch on plenty of them as we get through the
All right.
Q&As too.
We should have more
Wonderful.
forums for quality people to get together. This is fun.
Thank you.
All right, well, thank you very much for this very insightful, wonderful presentation. Before we move on to the Q&A, I'd like to draw the audience's attention to the Handouts module within GoToWebinar Control Panel, where they'll find some additional documentation related to today's presentation for some further reading. Now, I would like to invite the audience, though, to continue sending their questions or comments right now for this Q&A portion of the webinar using the questions window. I've already received some questions, though, so we'll get ourselves started with those. Our very first question for you all first states that it seems as though personnel are sometimes hesitant to document things because they get hung up on how to do it perfectly, for example, with format, and or are torn between whether they should provide as much detail as possible or whether there are certain details that auditors or inspectors may dislike. So the question is, what do you recommend or for encouraging and optimizing documentation practices?
I'll jump in here.
I'll take that. I'll jump in and take that one to start with, if you don't mind. But I'll be quick. The worst thing that you can do is to not write it down. So I don't care, especially when I'm working with earlier stage startups. Don't worry, don't get hung up on the format and what template to use and what format, and am I saying the right thing or am I saying the wrong thing? Am I opening up vulnerabilities? I don't care. Write it down somewhere. And have that, you know, if you're worrying about how do I do this change evaluation, I was like, I don't care, just write it down in some space. We can work on making it better later, but it's a worse sin to not write it down and just kind of blindly move forward than it is to worry about you know, whether an auditor or an inspector is going to dislike the way that you said something. And then I'll stop and let you all jump in.
I just wanted to say too, it doesn't have to be written down, right? You can probably tell from behind me, I'm an artist in my spare time. Make a picture, draw a flow chart. You know, we have people that are experienced writers that can take pictures and turn them into words later. You know, just get it down, draw a picture, whiteboard it out. You know, find a neighbor, you know, a cube mate. Draw a picture, get it down. That's my advice in any format.
I think also when you're implementing templates, like a suite of templates for reports and plans and protocols for your team, build in a little bit of guidance into those documents. If your team has questions or might be inexperienced with using those documents, tell them these first 5 sections are highly recommended, but the rest, blow it away, make it your own, change it up, add whatever you want, delete whatever you want. Really, I think a lot of times in templates, especially, quality professionals are hesitant to build in that voice or that guidance that young teams might need to really just know what to use or how to use it. So I would encourage that.
Yeah, good point. We put it in red font that you can delete and replace with your stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, make it your own.
Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that answer. Our next question would like to know if you could please speak to getting buy-in from management with an ask for forgiveness attitude who are doing medical device for the first time.
I'm not quite sure I understood the question, Ryan. Can you say that again?
Sure. They would like to know if you could speak about getting buy-in from management with an ask for forgiveness attitude. And I think specifically relating to when you're working with medical devices for the first time.
That's the key to a quality culture, right? From the top, to have that. If they don't have that, that's pretty sad. Go, you know, find a champion. Go to your VP of quality, your head of quality, go to the head of development, go to someone that is willing to champion that and bring it to senior management if the senior management team needs to hear it. But that's really the key, is that it's got to come from management.
Yeah. And I like what Laura said there. I mean, If it's a small enough company, they might not have a VP of quality or anything else like that yet. But if it's a small enough company, you might be using consultants or advisors from outside, that might help you think through the regulatory side. Go to them, look for champions there as an inroad, or even potentially, you're going to have a product development leader somewhere. It's usually one of the first groups that you build out in a really early company. If they've never developed a medical device before, then there's some educational opportunities here. But I think that if you need to look for that champion, start with the folks that have done it before. Start with the development teams if you need to, if you don't have quality regulatory, mindsets built in there yet. It's a sticky wicket.
Or become the quality champion yourself.
Well, we all should be the quality champions, right?
Yep.
Very good, thank you. Our next question would like to know then if you have any advice on implementing a new software that is a big culture change. Specifically, they say maybe it increases quality and more documentation, of course.
That's a good question.
I think
Because
a
it's
quality plan, is a good tool
little
to use
bits.
when you're,
Yeah.
In little
having a
bits.
plan
Don't
on
do it
how you're
all at
gonna
once.
implement.
Yeah.
Laying out your plan ahead of time.
Every growing company is going to face this, right? As you get bigger, you have to have technology help you, and it's how do you eat the elephant, right? A little piece at a time.
That's so important. You can't just jam the whole thing into place all at once. You've got to start small and grow it, which is why there's so much advantage to starting early in your processes as well. The requirements for what you have to get into place start smaller when you're early, and then it just grows. And if it grows with you, as a good software tool should, even then as new folks come into the mix, that's easy to continue to radiate out through the organization.
Excellent, thank you. We have a question here directed towards Kelly. It would like to know, do you think it is difficult to take a company from ISO 17025 quality system to a GMP/GLP system?
Sure, yeah, no, I don't think that's difficult. At the root, all of these different standards and requirements have the same basic elements. Every quality system standard out there has some requirements around those things. So if you're having to move from one standard to another or expand to include a standard, the best place to start is to try to line the two up. Look for places where everything overlaps. From there, you can determine what you need to do to expand your system to meet the new requirements. But these quality system elements, GMP, GLP, they all have a very core foundational elements that are the same, and they're not that different. So I don't find this difficult at all. Anybody on the panel have opinions here?
One of my quality directors that works for me, Kelly, he started in the semiconductor industry. He went to the music industry, and then he went to the pharma implementing quality systems. And he said, it's all the same. It's a quality system. It's all about process improvement and procedures, and
Yeah, documenting, repeatable. Yep.
The building blocks are the same across them. Yeah.
Right.
They are.
Right. The foundation is the same. Might need to add a procedure or two.
Yeah.
All right, well, thank you very much for that answer and for all of the answers today. However, we have reached the end of the Q&A portion of our webinar. Now, if we couldn't attend to some of your questions, the team at Qualio may follow up with you, or if you have some further questions, you can direct them to the contact information that is up on the screen right now. I want to thank everyone for participating in today's webinar. You will be receiving a follow-up email from XTalks with access to the recorded archive for this event. A survey window will be popping up on your screen as you exit, and your participation is appreciated as it will help us to improve our webinars. Now I'm about to send you a link in the chat box, and with this link you'll be able to view this event on this page, and you can also share this link with your colleagues when they register for the recording here as well. So I encourage you to do that. Now, please join me once more in thanking all our speakers for their time here today. I hope that you all found the webinar informative. Have a great day, everyone, and thanks for coming.